Good evening, beasties. This is Allie back in my time zone, Ross. Great to see you all. I took a red-eye home from saying goodbye to Grandma in California the night before last, and took the day off yesterday to do absolutely nothing but sleep. And now I'm back. Thanks for bearing with. Today I did another intense one. As I grieve my paternal grandmother, I've been also thinking a lot about my maternal grandmother who passed, longer ago than it feels like. I'm not going to do the mental math right. Oh, I did it by accident. It's been about 6 years. It doesn't feel like that, particularly since I'm still really close to her husband, my maternal grandfather. He's one of my favorite people in the entire world, and she feels very present whenever I spend time with him. But I decided to do a spread for her today because she's been on my mind, and spirituality really wasn't a part of my grieving process when she passed. Not in a way I was conscious of, at any rate. The moment she passed was actually the moment when I had to look at my beliefs and say, I'm not sure what happens after. And I need to find a way to be okay, regardless of whether there's more after we all gather here on Earth or not. And so that was an important part of grieving that loss, was figuring out ways to be comfortable with, or not even comfortable, but okay with uncertainty and with greater agnosticism than I'd allowed into my life before. So now as I'm thinking about my other grandmother's passing, I'm also thinking back to Grammy's passing, and I did the same grief spread for her that I did for Grandma the morning that she passed. So just as was the case with that other grief spread, the first three cards tell me collectively what I need to do for myself as I grieve this person. The second three cards answer three different questions about the person's death. And the final three cards tell me how I can honor the person who has passed. So starting with these cards about what I can do for myself, I pulled the Five of Pentacles, which is a sad, hard card. It indicates that you're hurting and that hurt is inevitable. The loss that you're suffering is inevitable. The second one I pulled was the Queen of Pentacles. You might remember, I really love this one. And this final one was the Seven of Swords. It makes sense that suffering came up here. I think that part of what I need to do is acknowledge that I still miss Grammy all the time. We were close. She's a complicated figure in my life, but I adore her and learned a lot from her, and a lot of both the best and the worst of my mom's approach to child rearing, I think, was inherited from her. And I value so much of what I learned from her, and I also grapple with so much of what I learned from her, and makes sense. Makes sense that a suffering card showed up. Queen of Pentacles. I've talked about her a lot before. She is that person who is materially comfortable, lives simply, and is a real expert at nurturing others. And she's one of the many people in my life that I think of when I think of this card. Someone who could make a soup from scratch, also sewed camping equipment herself, learned to backpack as a mom in the 60s because my mom was a Girl Scout and the Girl Scouts wanted to backpack, and so Grammy was just like, yeah, I'll learn how to do that, and I'll learn how to cook in the backwoods, and I'll learn how to do everything it takes to take you girls on this adventure, this empowering adventure that you want. So I think carrying that example with me and modeling it, that's definitely a way that I continue to feel Grammy's presence. So that one makes sense too. This final one was more complicated. This is the Seven of Swords. Seven of Swords suggests that either someone is pulling one over on you or you're going to need to pull one over on someone else. You might need to be a little sneakier than you're comfortable with. There's actually a second card in this spread that also indicates kind of a sneakiness being needed, and there are a lot of ways I could interpret that with respect to Grammy, but I think maybe that it partly has to do with the fact that she would certainly not wrap her head great around my gender or sexuality, or a lot of the things that are most important in my life. And so I need to kind of, when I think about her, think about me as she knew me and not as she might be forced to see me if I showed her all of myself. That's hard and complicated, but there are times, that's what the Seven of Swords indicates, there are times when a little bit of lying, if only by omission, is called for, and connecting with elderly relatives is certainly an instance where that comes up a lot. Sometimes radical honesty is called for, and other times it just is not. So that's where we are on that, for better or for worse. These questions about Grammy's death were also a little complicating. First question, was she ready to die? Pulled the Page of Swords. Second question, is she at peace now? Pulled the Sun. And finally, does she have a message for me? Two of Pentacles. The page, this one made me sad. When Grammy was in the end of being mentally fully present, she started to talk about going back to college. She was so brilliant and had so many skills and talents, but she never did earn a bachelor's degree. And towards the end of her life, she started talking about, oh, I'm thinking about going back to school. That's a really Page of Swords energy. Being young and excited and ambitious and ready to try something new. And that might indicate she wasn't quite ready to die. And that's really hard. But the Sun, the answer to is she at peace now, suggests that your conscious and unconscious minds are in harmony. And that, I think, is really beautiful because she suffered a lot of grief. Her son, my uncle, passed the year that I was born, and I don't think she ever really got over it. There was some denial there, and I think that the notion that she might not be in denial anymore, that's a really beautiful thought. The final card of these three that answer questions about Grammy's death was the Two of Pentacles. The question associated with that is, does Grammy have a message for me? And the Two of Pentacles suggests that you're juggling a few different things, and the name of the game is learning to be flexible and to make sure that the things you're juggling are meaningful. and to be juggling them at a pace that feels right to you. So if one of these balls doesn't feel meaningful, drop it. If, on the other hand, they do feel meaningful and the trouble is pacing and burnout and taking care of yourself, find a way to balance things. It's going to be worth it. I really like that. I like that a lot. Thanks, Grammy. I can do that. Finally, the final questions are about what I can do to honor her. And I pulled again, this one came up in my spread for my paternal grandma as well. Pulled the rejuvenation card. In other decks, this is often the judgment card. The Three of Cups, and finally the Three of Swords. I think that in this particular instance, focusing on the reframing of judgment as rejuvenation is a really good way to interpret this card as a way for me to honor Grammy. Because she was a lot of things, and judgy was certainly one of them. And she often had really good advice. She also often delivered it in not the nicest way in the entire world. I know that's something that my mom and I have both struggled with in very different ways, or to very different degrees anyway, probably pretty similar ways. And I want to keep in mind that having a clear sense of judgment and right and wrong is not necessarily a bad thing, but, a difficult phrase that my mom often used as I was growing up, which I think she may have gotten from my grandmother, was "you blew it." Like, if you did something wrong, that was sometimes a message that was part of a punishment, was "it's too late, you blew it." And I think that there's something in learning and teaching children that you reap what you sow. Actions have consequences. Karma is a thing. But there's also value in taking the consequences of your actions and then saying, okay, what am I going to do now as I live with the reality of these consequences? And I think thinking about a moment of judgment as an opportunity for rejuvenation, take what you sowed, but then you get to move on. It's not too late. You didn't blow it. Maybe you blew it once, but come back to life and take another shot. I think that's a good way to live Grammy's legacy while tempering it and letting it evolve to be kinder. I also pulled the Three of Cups. This one I thought was very, very lovely. The Three of Cups is a love card, and specifically not only romantic love, but celebrating accomplishments with friends, just having a life rich with many kinds of love, which Grammy really did. Love of, she and my grandfather are forever my role model as far as what a great relationship looks like. They were married for over 50 years and still so visibly in love. And she also had an abundance of friends and a rich community. And so this one means a lot. This one's good to see. And then finally, the Three of Swords. This is the other one that has to do with a little bit of deceit, a little bit of trickiness. It either means, again, that someone is tricking you or that you're being called to trick someone. It's interesting that the swords are so often the suit that suggests that. I think it's because the swords are about cold, hard logic, and they're not above compromising strict morals if that is the best way to achieve some other good. That is not my style, generally speaking. And again, many ways it could apply to my grandmother and my continuing to hold her as a role model, while also knowing that some of her choices as a parent weren't great. Some of her choices as a religious person weren't great. Again, don't think she would be thrilled that her grandchild is a trans non-binary unicorn in a whole bunch of relationships with people of different genders. And I can still love and honor her. Just need to find a way to reconcile that. And that might involve a little bit less radical honesty than I usually prefer. I'm glad that she's having a son after life, and I love her. Thanks for being here, beasties.